In the 1730s, the British Empire was the ultimate superpower on Earth. But what they did not know that deep inside the jagged, uncharted mountains of Jamaica, this global empire would run into an absolute nightmare, an enemy they could not see, they could not attack, they could not track, and they could not defeat. For decades, a sovereign community of former enslaved Africans, known as the Maroons, waged a flawless guerrilla war against British colonizers. The British expected traditional muskets, cannons, and European battlefield formations. What they got instead was a biological warfare. This is the untold story of the Maroon freedom fighters who weaponized the deadly ecology of the Caribbean and to crush an empire using a weapon so terrifying, unique, it was completely scrubbed from Western military textbooks. The Beehive Catapult. The Beehive Catapult was designed by the Maroons in the interior of the island. To understand how the Maroons pulled this off, you would have to understand the terrifying geography of the cockpit country itself. This was not just your regular forest. It is a hostile, surreal landscape of steep limestone hills separated by deep vertical pits and blind ravines. To the British soldiers, this was a death trap ready to trap. Because of this, the British troops became miserable. The sweltering heat, the humidity, and the daily torrential downpours rotted their boots and ruined their gunpowder. They marched in tight, single-file lines through narrow, rocky passes. This made them completely vulnerable when they were in single file. As they were penned, they would be crushed by stones and they would be attacked from all angles by the Maroons. But the Maroon didn't just live in the terrain, they mastered it. They communicated with each other across Mountain Peak when there was no walkie-talkie, using the simple abeng made from the cow horn. The abeng allowed them to send message miles away to each other from mountain peaks with coded messages. The Maroons' ambush was perfect. Imagine fighting some men, hundreds of men in the bushes in red coats. While the Maroons were camouflaged with bushes which were cheap, England spent millions of dollars on their red coat soldiers, sending them to fight guerrilla warfare in red in the bushes. This gave the Maroon fighters an unfair advantage as their enemy was easily seen from miles away in red. Now drop your name and country where you're watching from so we can send you a shout out in our next video. In this video, we would like to send a shout out to Kareem from Barbados and Simone Ali from New York City. The Maroons' tactic was simple but very efficient. The Maroons specialized in the perfect ambush. They would lure hundreds of redcoat soldiers into a narrow, steep-sided rock valley. Once the British soldiers were trapped at the bottom, the exits were then blocked. But the Maroons wouldn't always waste precious gunpowder to finish the job. They looked up at the trees. And would you imagine they fought the British with bees, wild colonies of bees. Unlike the domesticated bees that the Europeans were used to, these wild bees nested in massive, heavy structures inside tree hollows and rock surfaces. If these bees' nests were disturbed, they didn't just sting, they would violently swarm and hunt threats for hundreds of yards away. And so the Maroon scouts learned how to carefully harvest these massive active wild hives. They built rudimentary but high effectively counterweight pulley catapult system, and this would help to launch these hives in narrow ravines when the British were in single file and traveling and hunting them. When the British soldiers reached the absolute center of the ambush zone, the Maroons would launch the hives directly into the limestone floor below. Once the impact shattered the casings instantly, it unleashed tens of thousands of furious, aggressive bees directly into the packed ranks of the redcoat soldiers. The results were devastating and chaotic. The heavy wool uniforms of the British soldiers trapped the angry bees inside their clothing, blinding by stings to the eyes and face. Suffocating from shock, and they dropped their muskets in pure agony. the British military formation would completely collapse in a matter of seconds. This wasn't just a random act of chaos. It was a highly calculated psychological operation by the Maroons. To the British, fighting human warriors was one thing, but fighting a group that could seemingly control and command the very forces of nature itself was something else. That shattered their morale completely. Survivors ran back to the colonial coastal towns, babbling terrifying stories of magical jungle entities and swarms of flying death. Every single time the British sent a fresh regiment into the cockpit country, they returned completely defeated, with massive casualties and zero territory gained. The British Treasury was bleeding millions of pounds trying to protect their hyper-profitable sugar plantations from the Maroon raids and fires, but they couldn't secure a single military victory in the interior. So by 1739, the British Empire realized the absolute unthinkable. They could not win. For the first time in modern history, the mighty British military machine was forced to their knees to beg an army of former enslaved Africans for a peace treaty. The treaty legally recognized the Maroons as fully free, sovereign rulers of their own land, creating a nation within a nation, decades before the abolition of slavery. The next time you look at a global empire, remember this. All it takes to bring it down is a narrow path, an unyielding will to be free, and a very, very angry swarm.